I'm living in Tampa Heights, which is right next to Ybor City in Tampa, right? So these are all like little suburbs of Tampa, and they're all built back in the 1920s, right? 1890s, 1910s, 1920. So I bought this 8-unit building. I renovated it into a triplex. I mean, I'm driving an Audi. I'm dating a woman that I should not have been dating. Like, I mean, I don't know what she was thinking. So I'm going on vacations, like everything, life's good. So, but every once in a while, like where things happen, you get a phone call. Hey, this is what just happened. And one time I got a phone call from same broker, Kelly. Kelly called me up and said, listen, we got a problem. I want to say this was Alan Duncan. This was one of the first ones that I had done, right? We used him, but and so she calls me up and says, listen, Alan Duncan never made his first mortgage payment. And I had a friend of mine, or one of my co-defendants, when we closed on that loan, we both got checks for whatever, 40 or 50 grand. Keep in mind, we're also buying, some of this money's going into a business account. We're buying property. So it's not like I'm pocketing hundreds of thousands of dollars, or even $20,000 or $30,000 on every closing. I'm more like I'm getting 25, 10, 20, and this guy's getting 10, and this guy's getting 15. And then we're taking 60 and we're putting it into the business account. We're buying a bunch of vacant lots, or we're building some new houses. So we're trying to kind of take all this and turn it into a development company. But we still have to pay our bills. So, my buddy's got to go to Amsterdam at least for 2 weeks,
Right.
He's from Belgium. You apparently have to do that at least once a year. So so when I gave him the check, I said, look, you're going to make here's like 20 grand or 15 grand, but you got to make the payments on this thing for the next 6 months. He goes, no problem. I said, okay. So she calls me up a month and a half later and says, hey, Alan Duncan did not make his first payment. And I went, oh my God. And he was actually renting the apartment downstairs from me. So I run downstairs and I open the door and I go, bro, I'm like, did you make Duncan's payment? And he turns around and he's like, is it due? And I was like, oh my God. So I run back, I grab the phone. I'm like, he didn't make it. She's like, okay, well, here's what's happening. The account executive is calling. They've got the file, and it was South Star Bank. South Star Bank has it. They reviewed it. They've already been ordering documents. They're saying that this guy, there's a problem. It's falling apart. Like the whole thing's falling. They know something's wrong.
But they don't know exactly what. It's just something suspicious.
At that, she didn't tell me that on the phone.
Okay.
Like she's saying there's something wrong. They're freaking out.
Yeah.
Because the account executive didn't really know. She just got a phone call saying, hey, have you ever met this broker? Did she meet the guy? Who is the guy? He hasn't paid. We're calling the cell. Nobody's answering. And really most of this was my buddy Rudy's fault. He's just not doing any of this stuff. Any of the things he's supposed to be doing. So we go to the office and I call South Star Bank. I get the secretary and I said, look, I need to talk to whatever the big guy was. It was, one of them was like the president and one was like somebody else. Anyway, vice president. So I said, I need to talk to so-and-so, the vice president. And she says, I'm sorry, he's in a business meeting. I said, well, listen, tell him this is Alan Duncan. Like you need to go tell him it's Alan Duncan's on the phone right now. I'm assure you he wants to talk to me. And she's like, all right, hold on. And I mean, like 20 seconds later, speakerphone. Hey, Mr. Duncan, this is so-and-so. And, I'm here with with our lawyer and the president of the bank and our head of fraud. Mm-hmm. We were just discussing you. And I was like, okay, I understand that you guys I haven't made my first payment. I said, it actually came back in the mail. I had the wrong address. That was completely my fault. And I apologize. I said, but I can get you a cashier's check today. I will overnight it. No problem. Hope that's going to be okay. They said, we're way past that. Way past that. Mm-hmm. I said, okay. Well, what's the issue? And they were like, I mean, look, to be honest, I don't think I'm talking to Alan Duncan. I don't think there is an Alan Duncan. He's like, I mean, your social security number was issued a couple of years ago. We called the bank. And this was, we had gone with like South or SunTrust Bank, right? So it was a real bank. Mm-hmm. So it wasn't our normal bank. And they called, they don't they don't have any record of you. And I was like, well, I've never been happy with South Star Bank there. If, you know, it sounds like a banking error. And they're like, yeah, I don't think this isn't cute.
He says, I don't think I'm talking to Alan Duncan right now.
Right.
And you were
terrified. Terrified.
But you have to be playing it cool, I guess.
I mean, I know. What am I going to say? No, you're talking to Matt Cox. Like, I can't say that. Yeah. Like, I'm just got to keep running with it. Just like, okay, well, look, you know. And he's like, you know, we called the DMV. This, you know, they don't have a list for you in the you know, in their website. We think that the you know, we don't think you exist.
Yeah.
You know, we're still waiting for a phone call back from who so and so and so and so and so. And I'm just like, oh my God. And I said, have you called the authorities yet? And they were like, no, we haven't. But once we put our file together, we will. And then the head of the fraud department, they said, oh, by the way, Mr. I forget his name, but the head of the fraud department worked for the FBI for like 10 years or something, or 12 years. So I mean, I'm just like, and by the way, the broker is there, and my buddy Rudy is there. And I mean, he's pacing the room. She's in tears, crying, like there. And I'm like, okay, well, fellas, I said, where's this headed? Where's this going? What are we doing? And they're kind of chuckling and joking about it. And I remember being like, thinking, what's the deal? Like, it's weird. And I said, look, well, why don't let me just pay you back. They said, we'll get the money. We're not worried about it. I said, you don't seem worried about the money, about getting any of the money back. Like, why don't you just let me, I'll cut you a check. I can get you the money back. Like, what do I owed them like 150 or something. I forget exactly. It was nothing. I'm like, I owe you 150,000. Let me cut you a check for 150,000. And they were like, no, you know, that's, we'll get the money back when we foreclose on the property. And that's when I was like, oh, they think the property is worth like $195,000 or something. And I went, oh, I said, I understand. Okay. I said, do you have the appraisal in front of you? And they were like, yeah. And I said, open it up. I said, take a look at comp number 1. That's owned by a guy named, you know, Lee Black. Comp number 2, you know, is owned by, you know, whatever, David Silver, whatever the names were. And I'm like, you know, like black, silver, red. I said, I am all those people. And I said, let me tell you what I've done. And I tell them, just lay it out. Boom, 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 boom. I said, so you can call the FBI, but you're not going to get all your money back. Or you can let me give you your money back. And we can let sleeping dogs lie. The whole thing goes away. I apologize. You know, I had every intention of making all the payments. It's a glitch. You caught me. No, my bad. And so these guys are just like, oh my God. Like now they put me on hold. They're looking through the file. They come back. And I remember at some point we go back, forth. And finally they come back and they said, listen, you still have the money? I said, yeah. Well, first they come back, they threaten me. Oh, well, when we give us to the FBI, and I said, that's not true. I said, the money was deposited into a bank account. It has since been moved. The bank account has been closed. It's been removed in cash. That money is gone. You will never see that money. I will be cutting you. If I pay you back at all, it'll be from another account. And so the FBI agent ends up saying he's right. Even if we caught him red-handed, the likelihood that any of these funds will ever be recouped is zero. Like there's almost no money's ever recouped. And so we end up, they put me on hold again. They come back and they go, how quickly can you get us a cashier's check? And I go, and like that day I go, get them a cashier's check, overnight the cashier's check. They never called the FBI. They never did anything. Now at that point, we actually ditched James or Alan Duncan. I remember at that point, we went to the mall, ran up all the credit cards and just threw everything away and walked away because it was shot. You know, that guy was shot. I think we borrowed whatever, $800,000 or $900,000 in his name.
So with the banks, it's really, really all about the money.
Listen, when I go on the run, I got one where I was caught so red-handed. It's insane how bad it was. And listen, that's nothing. I got caught by Washington Mutual one time. I was caught by Washington Mutual where we had done 6 owner-occupied duplexes. So if you say you're going to live in a house, you can get about 95% financing. But if it's an investment property, you got to put down 20%. You get about 80% financing. So A buddy of mine who was a sheriff's deputy, we had his wife buy, I'm going to say 6 owner-occupied duplexes, saying she lived in every single one of them.
Mhm.
Well, you can't owner-occupy 6 dwellings. Like, that's fraud. Now, granted, her W-2s and pay stubs were correct, but she didn't put the down payments down. Even the down payments we didn't put down. We actually got cash back. But months later, they called a lawyer from Washington Mutual ends up calling the mortgage broker and saying that they ended up with 2 of the owner-occupied duplexes because Washington Mutual had a credit line extended to one of the lenders who'd lent the money. So it actually was Washington Mutual. So it was a couple months later when they went to sell it in a, they package them together and sell them. They realized we have the same customer with 2 duplexes side by side, both owner occupied. This is fraud. So she comes in, she tells me, oh my gosh, this lawyer's on the phone. This is what happened. I'm like, oh, wow, this is horrible. I end up getting on the phone with him. We have a conversation. And I'm like, he's like, look, this is a big deal. We could call the FBI. I'm like, look, who knows who was involved in this? Maybe somebody on your side was involved. Maybe somebody on my side. I don't know what my mortgage broker did. I'll deal with her on my own. Why don't you just let us refinance the properties? Not only did we talk him into allowing us to refinance the properties, he gave us a reduced balance of what we owed him because we couldn't borrow enough to pay him off. So they took like a $20,000 hit just to refinance those properties. Never called the FBI. Never did anything. It was absolutely fraud. Yeah, I had a broker one time. We got called with over $1 million in loans that he had done that were fraudulent. Pinnacle Bancorp, which was out of Chicago, the owner called me and he was like, "Look, your mortgage broker did this." Like there was a bunch of canceled checks. They were fake canceled checks, so they looked like they had run through the bank for somebody's rent, but they hadn't. Does that make sense? Like you pay your rent. They deposit it, it goes to the bank, and they've got all the numbers and everything. Well, I had a bunch that were blank, that all you had to do was fill out your borrower's information, and then you cut and pasted his name and his address at the upper left-hand corner. You make a copy of it. It looks like canceled checks. We had 24 of them. Well, one of my brokers was using them for all of his files. Like, even if the person really had a rental history, he didn't want to order it. He just did this. It was easier.
It's faster, yeah.
Yeah, just an idiot.
Wow.
So they catch $1 million worth of loans. They call me up, and then they caught another $1 million, but they had already sold them to Household Bank. So while I'm on the phone with the owner, his name's Gary, and we're talking, he's like, "Look, this is what we found. This is what happened." And I remember I said, "Gary, at the end of this conversation, if you think I'm cutting you a check for $1 million," I said, "I just don't have it. I don't have it." And this was when I owned the mortgage company. And he says, "No, I'm asking you for your word that if any of these come back on us, they're in Florida, they're in your area, you'll help us get rid of the properties. We'll foreclose. We're going to have to resell them. I don't want to be flying down there. Just help us get rid of them." I said, "Absolutely, of course, no problem." I said, "Well, what are you going to do with them?" He goes, "Well, they're going to be a part of a package, like a $3 million package we're selling to Household Bank." The other ones they had caught had already been sold. The ethical thing to do is to contact Household Bank, say, "We will buy those back. We are going to take care of it." It's not what happened. In fact, Gary flew down a couple weeks later, took me and several of the brokers, not that broker, but several of the brokers out to dinner, had a few drinks, and he openly admitted, he's like, "Look, I don't care if all the loans have fraud in them, as long as they don't come back on me. That's what I'm concerned about." Because there's a clawback clause for 1 year. He's like, "So if they can perform for 1 year, I don't care." That was it.
How many people in the industry do you think are operating like this? And by like this, I mean in the aforementioned gray area.
I would say there's probably after the 2008 financial crisis,
Yeah.
I would say it cleaned up considerably. But I would say at this point, it's just as bad as it ever was. And keep in mind, a lot of the loans that caused the problems were like, they called them liar loans, or no qualification, like no qual
Mhm.
loans, right? No income. Um, well, those loans they exist again. Like there are subprime companies that are doing that again. I don't think they call them subprime anymore. They call them, so they got some other name.
Yeah,
But
rebranded.
they've rebranded a little bit, but it's happening all over again.
It just seems the whole real estate slash banking system is very prone to this kind of corruption.
I mean, but how can you fix it? Like if a lot of the things they fixed, a lot of the manipulation they fixed, but if you tighten it too much, then the average person can't get a loan.
Mhm.
Like so and the thing is, some of these loans, sometimes changing a W-2, should that person have gotten into that house? No, he shouldn't have. He didn't qualify. But he makes all of his payments. So it's like, is it a fraudulent loan? Yeah, but it performs.
Mhm.
So, I think that I would say that, I forget what the FBI statistic was. It was like 20% or 30% prior to the financial crisis. It was like 20 or 30% of like bank loans, they were saying, contained some kind of fraud, even if it was just a lie. If you want to cut 30% out of the, that's a ton. That's a ton.